All right, hi folks. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar on security and risk in Microsoft 365. Today, we're going to be exploring some of the best approaches to maintaining a secure environment without really impacting end user collaboration. Our conversation is going to cover some of the ways we can leverage the out-of-the-box functionality provided by Microsoft, and then we'll talk about when it makes sense to start investigating some of the more advanced capabilities of some third-party tools. So, on the call today, I'll begin with myself here. My name is Davis D'Souza, and I am the AvePoint lead at Habanero Consulting. I have a background in software business development, and I spent the last 3 years at Habanero helping build out our AvePoint practice. With me on the webinar today is Carmen Kurchun. Carmen is an infrastructure architect and has over 20 years of experience here at Habanero in all things SharePoint and Microsoft. So Carmen's expertise is highly sought out, and she's going to be sharing some insight today on how to approach this in a practical way. So to introduce Habanero Consulting, Habanero, we're focused on helping organizations become better places to work. So we have over 25 years in the collaboration and content management practice, and we continue to create high-performing and much-loved digital solutions on the Microsoft platform. We've carved out a nice niche creating better workspaces through exceptional employee and customer experiences. As Habanero's grown, we've developed a presence across Canada, starting in Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, and a smaller group of hubs out in Winnipeg. Habanero has been recognized for our employee experience consulting and digital business services by both ALM and Gartner, along with recognition from our internet product, Go, from Nielsen Norman Group and Step 2 Designs. So now to introduce our fictitious company we're going to discuss today, and we're going to center our story around. So given that we're talking about an organization's private and sensitive data, we're going to focus on the fake organization of Acme Corporation. And the way we're going to center the story is pretty common themes that we've seen with a bunch of different organizations. And the story is going to start with Jen, who's the CTO of Acme. And Acme is a long-standing client of Habanero's. Jen requested our expertise to help secure some of their sensitive content in Microsoft 365. So like Acme, many organizations out there have had to quickly adopt M365 at the beginning of 2020 as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the first priority was really around how can we allow users to get their work done remotely and be efficient doing it. So most organizations didn't really get a chance to consider and implement many of the controls or mature processes around governance, lifecycle management, or reporting. So the issue there is, as adoption picks up, without those processes in place, an organization's risk and vulnerability from unmanaged content in the cloud ends up growing exponentially. And then you can end up with this daunting task of how do I start, plugging some of the holes in the proverbial dam here. So for a bit of additional context, Acme has this long-standing relationship with us, and so we know a few things. First and foremost, when they rolled things out, they wanted to rely mostly on the out-of-the-box capabilities if possible. So end user provisioning was turned on in both M365, Teams, and SharePoint Online. They also went with the out-of-the-box configuration for guest users and external collaboration. So if you don't know already, by default that is turned on. And Acme wanted their employees to feel empowered to actually get their work done. So user experience was paramount, and we didn't want to put up any barriers to people doing their work. So last bit there, just really we wanted to make sure that those tools were used as much as possible out of the box before we start to go looking at third-party solutions. The last piece of the puzzle here is that Acme is actually in the middle of a migration project. So they've got contents from some various on-prem repositories, and they're moving that to the cloud with a couple different methods, more of a lift and shift. And then for some other parts of their content, there's some new information architecture and some content culling that's going on. So, how does that really change our approach to managing data risk? It just makes this bit more of a moving target, right? So sensitive content could end up in repositories that it's not really meant for. So for example, PII or whatever else ending up in an end user's OneDrive for Business. And then from a compliance perspective, this could end up leading to content being retained for much longer than it's required. So that introduces a level of risk as well. So we got together with Jen and we focused on 3 key areas and 3 key outcomes that we wanted from an engagement. So we wanted to make sure that we're leveraging what we got out of the box. We want to get a good understanding of what's our current security posture in Microsoft 365. And then once we've established that security posture, we've got a bit of a plan on how we want to tackle that. How can we start to automate some of the more manual tasks involved and set ourselves up for success in the long run? So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Carmen now, and Carmen's going to talk about how we actually went about helping out with these 3 key parts.
Good morning, folks, and thank you, Davis, for setting up the context for the remaining of the webinar. One of the first activities at the onset of the engagement was to work with ACME IT, the risk and compliance team, and the legal team to get a clear understanding and definition for the following 3 kind of topics or things. One of what is the sensitive content? Could sensitive content be stored in Microsoft 365? And what are the organization reporting and auditing needs? And we're going to take every single one of those, and we're going to talk a little bit further about what that means in the context of ACME and maybe a little bit of a general setting around out-of-the-box capabilities. So the first one there is what is sensitive content? And when we did this in the context of Microsoft 365 sensitivity info first, which are available out of the box, and I think there were about 130 last time I checked. And we all know that PII, financial, health, medical, or things like driver license, social insurance number, passport number are considered sensitive information, and those are already defined. And they're available for all organizations in Purview or Compliance Center. For some organizations, the sensitivity info type available in the tenant are more than enough. However, for other organizations, the ability to create specific sensitivity info type specific to their industry and vertical, such as safety incidents or acquisition restructure, are very important. And this is something that ACME really used because they do have specific sensitivity info type created, and they are reporting on or surfacing the signals associated with those with that information. The second piece of, the second definition that we needed was around sensitivity content or sensitive content and where that can be created and who can access it. So during the early days of collaborating in the cloud, lots of organizations used the principle of no sensitive information to be stored in Microsoft 365. However, with ACME position in this was a little bit different, and I think most of organizations changed that look right now. And the times have changed now, and sensitive information is stored in Microsoft 365 and is exchanged using cloud services. However, not all those workloads or services are treated equally, and we know that in the ACME situation and most likely all the other organizations out there, Exchange Online, it was used to send sensitive information, by using emails and such. Storing information and documents with sensitive content in SPO and Teams was also acceptable. Maybe less when it comes to Teams chats and conversation, but when it comes to the Files tab and documents that are stored in SharePoint Online, that was totally a perfect repository to use for that type of information. However, storing information and documents with sensitive content in OneDrive for Business, that was a definite no in ACME's case. There is another single, angle to this question, though, is this information, or who's accessing the information, is the risk associated only with the guest users and external users, so people that are coming from outside our organization? How about the users from within the organization? Maybe oversharing some of those confidential information before the right time, before the time is right, is a concern as well. And there is that concept of insider risk, where sharing content with people from within the organization when they are not added to the workspace, to that repository with permission, is also a consideration that ACME was reporting on. The third piece, or the third question that we talked with the client about, was the organization reporting needs. And when it comes to reporting, there are various ways to look at this. Is who is accessing the content? Is the content stored in the right location? Is the content shared internally or externally, as we already discussed? Are sensitivity labels or sensitivity info type implement and deploy an ACME, and is this content in the right repositories and is being accessed by whoever it needs to be accessed? Okay, so let's just the best way to actually, after we learn all those definitions and such, will be to go through a scenario. And it's just happened during our engagement. ACME team had one request to report on who has access to documents containing sensitive information type. Out of the box were custom that they had created, and those documents, and where were those documents stored? And the repositories they were looking at were SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, Microsoft 365 Groups, and Teams. This request came from the risk and compliance team, and we learned by working with ACME IT team that this was actually a reoccurring monthly kind of ask from that team, because they were supposed to report to their leadership team on how often this happened, what kind of actions were taken, what is their posture when it comes to data risk. So we're working together with ACME team through this scenario. Was our golden opportunity to learn firsthand and to understand the process the team was going through, flag gaps and inefficiencies, and also identify areas that could benefit from some automation. So the first step on this, working with the team, the first step we learned that they're going through is to generate the permission report. This could be done using PowerShell, which is a faster way to do it, but requires some skills, or leverage the user interface in Microsoft 365, which is a little bit slower. It's really time consuming. ACME is a technical team. They have the skills in-house, and they were well positioned to leverage PowerShell for this step. So they already saw some efficiencies because of that. They were able to generate this report that you can see on the screen quite quickly. The one problem, this report gave them only a narrow view into the entire story or scenario we were supposed to work through. And yes, they could identify who has permission to that information, but there was no information about the sensitivity of the content associated, for those, if those items contain any sensitive information, or how all this information should be prioritized. What should I look at first, right? So let's just go to the second step on this that they needed to complete. And it was to identify where sensitive content was present. And for this, ACME was using the data loss prevention policies. As this was a reoccurring ask from the security and compliance team for ACME IT, the team already had the necessary DLP policies created and enabled. In the case of ACME, the data loss prevention policy is existing, so that was a time saving in their case. However, for some organizations that are just starting using this functionality, these policies will need to be created first. From our experience, we noticed that often organizations have DLP policy targeting Exchange Online, and this maybe it's coming from the on-prem kind of capabilities that we had associated with Exchange. However, fewer organizations are leveraging DLP policies to report on data risk in association with SharePoint Online or MS Teams chats and conversation, or even OneDrive for Business accounts. So this might be for some organization an area that needs to be implemented first before you can leverage it to report on this data risk. So coming back to ACME and our scenario, the DLP matching report the team had was already available, and it allows us to expose some of information that was related to the sensitivity info type that was present in some of the documents. And you can see from that screenshot, um, it gives us information about the signals that were present on the number of signals that were present on those documents, who modified the content last, the time when that content was modified, and a little bit of information about the severity, low and high, based on certain criteria. So that puts us one step ahead, one step further. However, we still need to put this on top of the information generated from the permission inventory report that we had in step 1. And we also still don't know who accessed that information. So we're going to go to step 3, which is the audit of the search log. And for this one, once again, this is something that's available out of the box, and it's quite easy to create in Compliance Center, and it's quite easy to create those reports using the audit search log. And for this specific case, the team at ACME used some of the actions that are very specific to collaboration, like access to documents, delete, check out, modify, move, downloads, right? We are all familiar with those. So once the search is completed and output is available, and you can see from my screenshot, you can download the results. Upon downloading the report, the logs are not, or the logs, those are not really in a format that can be easily read. So we need to use some kind of JSON transform and Power Query editor to format those and in a consumable way to allow us some slicing and dicing of the information. The story these logs will tell us is who accessed the information, where the access was initiated from. As you can see, there is an IP address there that's um, um, blurred, and also the user who accessed that information, and the time, of course. As you can tell, it was a little bit of a journey to get all this information so far. However, this is not all. Right now, they have to put it all in one place to concatenate all that information and produce this report for the risk and compliance team in a format that will be easy to action if necessary, right? So let's just move, go to the next slide and see what we learn by working with the ACME team through this process. So this was a continuous process for them. As we learned, they have kind of monthly requests for certain type of reporting, but they also had some of them ad hoc, right? Depends on different incidents. So it was an ongoing process. It was highly manual, even though they were quite skilled and used PowerShell, and they had some of the capability already implemented because they've been using it for a while. It was still a lot of steps to complete and a lot of manual overlaying of the information to kind of get to where they needed to be. It was slow to react because once that report was generated, they were giving it to the risk and compliance team, and the risk and compliance team was supposed to determine if there is any action to take based on information being shared, overly shared, or shared properly, and who accessed it, right? It was laborious and a lengthy process, and we've seen the reason why. But if we add to that the fact that the risk and compliance team was supposed to actually reach out to the business and rectify, take some actions on some of the signals that were identified, that adds even more to that process. It was also a moving target just because data was, our users are collaborating effectively and efficiently in Microsoft 365 and are creating more and more content than ever before. And the company was also going through an through a migration process. So they're going, bringing more content from on-prem to the cloud. And we also know that, through that process, if you don't have proper tools on-prem to identify if content contains some PII, like sensitive information, that information as part of the migration project might end up in repositories where they're not really adequate for that. So there was a lot of work that they were doing as a result of the migration process. So you can see how, and you can understand how some of the team was feeling the burden and a little bit of a frustration because, at the end of the day, they thought they achieved something, but they're coming back next day and they realize they have to start all over again. Okay, so let's just see what we can do about that, how we can help them. So we learned that Acme was leveraging a lot of the out-of-the-box capabilities, and they were doing it quite well. They were looking, though, for a little bit more than that. For once, an ability to see in one glance what is happening across their tenant, more like a temperature reading, right? Engaging, if their day is going to be sunny or stormy, right? Ability to be proactive and to prioritize an action on high items or high risk items and high exposure items first, rather than maybe actioning the items that were a low risk just because they had no better way of prioritizing that. And if possible, delegate as necessary. I mean, the report they were generating as part of our scenario was for the risk and compliance team. Why not have the risk and compliance team get access to that report or generate that report on their own if you have the proper tool and automation in place? And then IT team can use that time to do, other activities that are leveraging their skills to their, to better ability. So because of all those three main wishes that they had, we decided to introduce a third party to them, and we introduced a third party provided by AvePoint. So just a couple of words about AvePoint, just in case you don't know who AvePoint is. AvePoint is one of the largest ISVs. They are a tier 0 partner with Microsoft, and their roadmap is pretty much in alignment with Microsoft roadmap for their products. They have several tools for on-prem and cloud data management and data protection. It just happened that one of those tools for cloud for Microsoft 365 fits exactly the need for Acme team, and this tool is Insights. So let's just go and see what Insights is all about. So this is the dashboard that you get with the Insights. And from the get-go, you see there is a lot of information. It's a window into the tenant health from a risk and data security in a way. And there is a lot of color coding, and there is a lot of red in there and trends that gives you a little bit of a prioritization from the get-go. So you kind of know where you need to focus. We'll review some of the section in this dashboard and also dive into the information behind some of the numbers displayed on our screen here. The caveat, the numbers are low in this dashboard just because they're generated from a demo environment. In a production tenant, we see numbers in the range of thousands or sometimes hundreds of thousands, depends how large your tenant is. So let's look at the first section on the dashboard. Immediately, we can see on the left-hand side there under the overview section that we can report in one place on signals and data that from across all those 4 workloads, which is Microsoft Teams, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, and Microsoft 365 groups. It also shows information about external users that are configured or present in your Azure Active Directory and how many of them are actually active. It shows information about external links configured in your tenant. And those links are not really only external links that are generated with external parties like guest users or people from outside your organization, but they're also external links to people within the organization when there is that insider risk and oversharing of information, right? If somebody doesn't have access to the repository, then you can share that information with them. So those external links are surfacing that information as well. So let's just check the other section on the dashboard, and that is the overall risk matrix. So out of the box, the tool comes with an overall matrix with definitions that are given to you from the get-go. You have full control on how you define those. But what this matrix gives us, it allows us to calculate the risk associated with the information, leveraging a combination of exposure and sensitivity definition. So you can actually define what high exposure and high sensitivity means to your organization. And the combination of those two define, the overall risk of the items. Another section in this dashboard is the sensitivity item. So in the sensitivity item gives us the number of documents or the count of the documents where sensitive information is present in Microsoft 365 repositories that we report on, and that's Teams, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, and Microsoft 365 groups. I should also mention that the tool is leveraging the Microsoft 365 audit log search, and it doesn't need to do any kind of scanning. So we're using already the logs that are available in your tenant, just surfacing the right signal there. So we also see under the 120 number there is a trend like 4 going up. So that trend is going in the wrong direction. Maybe for tenants that are doing migration and heavy collaboration, healthy adoption, you're going to see that number trending up. And it's okay as long as there is no risk associated with that item, right? So let's just dive a little bit, click on the 120, the number that is a link. So if we click on that number, we will be able to be redirected to a list of the 120 items that were identified as containing sensitive information. And from the get-go, I want to show you the ability to automate some of the tasks. We have the ability to bulk select and apply sensitivity labels to all that content, assuming that your organization has sensitivity labels enabled and defined specific to your organization needs. So once applied, those sensitivity labels, we can see that they are under the section of sensitivity info, sensitivity label or sensitivity info type there. So the report is showing us what is being is configured, and we can also see a risk level and an exposure level. And in my screen here, I have them filtered to show me only the high risk level and the high exposure level. So I can prioritize my actions and my exploring around those items first before I go to the medium and low ones. So if we go to the next screen, we can also see that from the menu of each item, we can get more details without moving away from the screen itself. We can see detailed information about that specific document. We can view the permissions for the document. We can view the activity, apply sensitivity labels, or even tag that document. So let's just click on one of the options there. And if we click on the view activity, for example, or view permission, for example, let's just click on view permission, for example. So if we click on the next on view permission and go to the next screen, we can see in here that for that specific record that we have selected, we see the location of the record. We see who has permission from a group kind of perspective, and it's in that grayed out area that you have. But also if we select one of the groups, in our case was the members group, we can dive further into that group and see who is member of that group. So we can see the information, the reporting, the permission reporting from within that context, that item context that was deemed as highly sensitive. And furthermore, if you look at the on the grayed area, you see there is actually is grayed out. There is a remove permission button. If you check that group, you can remove that group, or you can remove those permissions from within there. So you can action those items from within the context of the application without having to move away to the location where that item exists. So let's just see a little bit more about the activity. So that was another big component of the report that the risk team was looking for, was who accessed that information. So on the activity report, which is available under the view activity from the menu on that item as well, you can see the time when the activity happened. You can see the IP address, pretty much exactly what the tool or the search log was giving us out of the box. You can see the user that accessed the information and also the type of action the user completed, like access, modify, downloaded if it was a downloaded. So you have all this at in one screen, in one location, without moving away and running a lot of PowerShell scripts and other reports. So just to go back to the main page of the insights, I also want to point out the information that is available at the bottom of that screen under the direct access sharing. You can see right at the bottom there it says everyone except external users. This means there are 18 items within that tenant or within my demo tenant, which was shared with everyone from within the organization. So if those items, if I was to click on that link, that link will will redirect me to another report that is available on Insights that will tell me if those items will have sensitive information, if they're high exposure or high sensitivity, and if they are shared with everyone within the organization. That could be one of those things that insider risk, that is considered an insider risk. So I hope that gives you a little bit of information how this third-party tool can help and automate with some of the tasks and activities the Acme team was going through to fulfill that simple scenario or ask that was occurring monthly from Acme security and compliance team. Davis, over to you.
Thanks, Carmen. So I think just to start to wrap up here and get back to the original outcomes that we wanted from this engagement. We went through the out-of-the-box tools. Carmen showed us what the scenario was in terms of how they were leveraging it right now, and all the steps that went into triangulating where potential security threats are in the environment. We were able to leverage the AvePoint Insights tool to get a really quick understanding of Acme's security posture, figure out where they were most at risk, and then even address it from there. And then the last bit there would be using that tool to make sure that we're not overburdening admins with some of the more manual tasks involved. And how can we understand what's going on in our environment, pick out the most important things first, and then act on them right away, because this is a constant process of keeping your environment healthy. Just to wrap up, this is a pretty common story we've heard. More and more organizations are in the same situation as Acme, and Habanero is providing an accelerated approach now to assessing and managing that risk in Microsoft 365. So we've got this engagement that we're working on with organizations on, and we can work with your organization to quickly establish a baseline security posture in Microsoft 365, and then set you up with the strategy and the proper tools to maintain a safe collaboration environment going forward. So if that's something you're interested in, I'll be following up with folks after the webinar here, making sure that everyone has a link to a recording, but I'll also include some more information on our risk and security assessment for Microsoft 365. For the folks that left questions in the chat, Carmen and I will follow up with you individually after the webinar. We're going to wrap up here right now so that we can give all you folks a little bit more time back in your day. But thanks again for joining. We really appreciate your time. Thank you, Carmen, for providing some of your expertise and your insights around this. And we look forward to connecting with you all about the assessment in the future here. Thanks a lot. Bye now.